Picture the shot glass, the salt on the rim, that amber liquid, the one drink the world associates with Mexico, with Jalisco, with the ancient volcanic highlands south of Guadalajara. Tequila feels like it grew straight out of the earth there. And, in a sense, it did. But here's the part nobody tells you. The technology that turns a plant into a spirit, the distillation itself, may never have existed in Mexico at all without sailors who left the Philippine Islands, crossed the entire Pacific Ocean on Spanish galleons, and jumped ship the moment they smelled land in Acapulco. Filipino sailors in Mexico, making the ancestor of tequila. The evidence isn't just a theory. Colonial records document it. The specific type of still those sailors used: 2 copper pans, a hollowed log, bamboo tubing, is still required by Mexican law today for the highest certification level of ancestral mezcal. The Philippines' technology is written into the legal definition of what makes a spirit authentically Mexican. So the question isn't whether this happened. The question is how and why there. Why those sailors? Why that coast? Why Jalisco? To understand why this happened in Jalisco and not somewhere else, you have to see the land itself. The town of Tequila sits about 65 kilometers northwest of Guadalajara, in a highland valley of the central western Mexican state of Jalisco. The soil there is red and volcanic, mineral-dense earth that drains quickly and suits the blue agave plant better than almost anywhere else on earth. The region harvests over 300 million agave plants each year. That is not an agricultural accident. It is a geological one. The blue agave of the Jaliscan highlands grows larger than agaves from the valleys below. Highland piñas, the succulent core extracted for distillation, can weigh as much as 110 kilograms against a valley average closer to 70. Larger piñas mean more fermentable sugars. The highlands don't just grow agave, they grow better agave. And the plant itself is extraordinarily particular. It favors altitudes above 1,500 meters, flowers once at its life's end, sending a 5-meter stalk topped with yellow blooms into the air. And then dies. Gimadores harvest the piña by hand, a process unchanged by modern machinery for centuries. This landscape made Jalisco a natural production site. But production requires technology. Fermented agave, pulque, which indigenous peoples had made for millennia, is not distilled agave. The gap between those two things is enormous, and bridging it required knowledge from somewhere far away. The Manila Galleon's trade route ran from 1565 to 1815, 2.5 centuries of continuous contact between Asia and New Spain. Ships left Cavite in Manila Bay at the end of June, reaching Acapulco the following March or April after nearly a year at sea. Acapulco was the Pacific terminus, and Jalisco is just up the coast. That proximity was not incidental. It was everything. Here is what the Manila Galleon trade actually looked like from the bottom. The popular image is of Spanish merchants and exotic silks. The reality, documented in colonial records, is that the vast majority of the galleon's crew consisted of Filipino natives, many of them farmers, street children, or vagrants press-ganged into service. Most died on the first crossings due to insufficient provisioning. By 1619, the galleons were crewed almost entirely by native Filipino sailors, not Spanish ones. Many of those sailors had no intention of making the return voyage. When a galleon reached Acapulco after nearly a year at sea, Filipino crewmen deserted in droves. The galleon Espiritu Santo's captain complained to the King of Spain in 1619 that of 75 Filipino crewmen, only 5 remained for the return voyage. The other 70 vanished into the colonial interior and were immediately headhunted. Wine merchants in Colima actively sought Filipino sailors for their skills in making tuba, fermented palm sap. These men knew something valuable. Back in the Philippines, they had been making lambanog, a distilled palm spirit, using technology completely unlike anything Spanish colonizers brought from Europe. The Filipino still, 2 copper pans, a hollowed-out log, and a bamboo tube. Simple, cheap, portable. Derived not from the Arab-influenced alembic of Spain, but from Mongolian and East Asian distillation traditions. 2 entirely different technological lineages, meeting in the same colony. From around 1569, Filipino immigrants established coconut plantations along the coast of Colima and Nayarit, producing vino de coco, coconut wine, that became enormously popular. Too popular. It cut into profits from wine imported from Spain, and in the early 1600s, the Spanish colonial government banned it entirely. A colonial authority put it plainly: there are in Nueva España so many of those Indians who come from the Filipinas Islands who have engaged in making palm wine along the other seacoast, that of the South Sea, and which they make with stills, as in Filipinas. That the palm groves and vessels with which that wine is made be burnt, the palm trees felled, and severe penalties imposed on whomever remains or returns to make that wine. That is the receipt. A colonial official, terrified by Filipino distillation, demanding the destruction of a trade, but they couldn't unmake the knowledge. By the early 1600s, indigenous Mexican peoples, watching Filipino settlers distill in Colima, had begun applying the same logic to what they had in abundance: wild agave. The first colonial mention of distilled agave spirits comes from 1619, the same year those galleon sailors were deserting in Acapulco. Spanish cleric Domingo Lázaro de Arregui described people in the coastal regions of Sierra de Nayarit distilling what he called mezcals, just 54 years after the Manila Galleon route opened. Historians describe mezcal as the product of the merging of pre-Columbian indigenous fermentation traditions and Asian distillation techniques brought over from the Philippines. In Colima, fermented agave used for mezcal is still called tuba, borrowed directly from the Filipino tuba. The word survived when the coconut trees did not. The ban on vino de coco paradoxically accelerated everything. When the plantations burned, Filipino distillers moved inland with their portable stills into highland valleys, where colonial authority was thinner, where people had fermented agave for thousands of years, but never had the technology to go one step further. The first clandestine distilleries in the highlands of Jalisco were not businesses. They were hiding places. Mezcal production moved from the coast into the valleys of Amatitan, Tequila, Magdalena, and El Arenal for one reason: distance from colonial authority. The Filipino style still was perfectly suited to this economy of concealment. It could be assembled from materials found anywhere: a hollowed log, copper pans, a piece of agave leaf in place of bamboo, and it could be taken apart and buried when authorities came looking. The portable still wasn't just a technological choice, it was a survival strategy. By 1638, Nueva Galicia's governor was already regulating mezcal sales, less than 2 decades after the first colonial record of its production. Something operating underground long enough always eventually surfaces, and when it does, someone taxes it. Commercial legitimacy arrived in pieces. In 1758, a land grant brought the Cuervo family to the town of Tequila, Jalisco. In 1795, Don José María Guadalupe de Cuervo received a permit from King Carlos IV to produce tequila commercially, following a period of prohibition under the previous king. The spirit was still called mezcal de tequila until 1893, when the name was shortened. The drink had earned its own identity. By 1888, the Souza family held the first license to export tequila. Don Cenobio Souza, who built the La Perseverancia distillery in 1873, was the first to call the spirit produced from blue agave tequila, and the first to send it to the United States. Then the railroad arrived, and the constraint that had capped production dissolved. The next two boosts came from American policy failures. During Prohibition, tequila was smuggled north across the border. During World War II, American distilleries converted to war production, European imports dried up, and tequila filled the gap. Two American crises, each one an opportunity for Jalisco. By 2012, 12 million cases of tequila shipped annually to the United States, a 54% increase in a decade. International sales from the tequila municipality reached approximately $572 million in 2024. The industry now supports roughly 200,000 people employed directly or indirectly across Jalisco. Jalisco calls itself the soul of Mexico. The state's motto, Jalisco es Mexico, anchors tequila alongside mariachi and ranchera music as exports of Mexican identity. In 1974, Mexico declared the term tequila intellectual property. The UNESCO World Heritage designation followed in 2006, covering 35,019 hectares of blue agave landscape. The town of Tequila predates the drink. Its Nahuatl name, Tequilan, means place of tribute. Founded by Franciscan friars in 1530, a century before the first recorded mezcal distillation in the region. Here is where the story folds back on itself. The highest certification level for mezcal in Mexico is ancestral mezcal. To earn that designation, a producer must use a specific type of still, clay vessel or hollowed wood, bamboo or carrizo tube, an internal collection container, the exact technology those 17th century Filipino sailors brought from the Philippines. Mexico's most traditionally certified spirit is legally defined by a Filipino invention. The Filipino settlers who carried this knowledge were nearly erased from the record, because the Spanish called all Asian migrants Chinos, meaning Chinese, filing a distinct people under a category describing someone else entirely. A 2018 genetic study gave numbers to what history had obscured. Approximately a third of Guerrero's population carries roughly 10% Filipino ancestry. Over the galleon trade's 250-year span, an estimated 75,000 Filipinos settled in western Mexico. One final strangeness. Blue agave was not scientifically classified as a species until 1902. A century after the tequila industry was already commercial. And because cultivated agave is reproduced by cloning rather than bat pollination, its genetic diversity has been narrowing for decades. A $500 million export rests on a monoculture. So why Jalisco? Because of the red volcanic soil that grows the world's best blue agave. Because of the highland altitude that concentrates the sugars. Because of Acapulco, where the galleons arrived, where the sailors deserted, where distillation stepped off a boat and walked inland. The answer to that shot glass is not one culture. It is a collision. Millennia of Mesoamerican agave cultivation, and one small copper and wood still crossing the Pacific on a galleon. Somewhere in Jalisco right now, in the oldest tabernas, producers still distill in Filipino-type stills, the same hollowed log, the same copper pans, because Mexican law says that's what ancestral means. The drink that defines Mexico was made possible by people Mexico didn't know to remember. Which raises a question the next bottle on your shelf probably can't answer. How many other things do we call ours that began somewhere else entirely?